What if I told you there's a way veterans can use their VA loan benefit to potentially live for free while building long-term wealth through real estate? Most veterans have never even heard of house hacking, and honestly, this is one of the most powerful ways to use your VA loan benefit. My name's Frye. I'm a licensed loan officer and I specialize in VA loans. I'm super boring. I do VA loans and educate veterans, and then I spend time with my family. But I wasn't always boring. I used to be a Marine Corps infantry officer. I've PCS'd, I've deployed, I've trained on the East Coast, the West Coast, and now I'm here to help you utilize and leverage the benefit that you, veteran, have earned. One of my favorite strategies to teach veterans about is house hacking, because this strategy can completely change your financial future if you do it correctly. So what is house hacking? House hacking is when you buy a property, live in part of it, and rent out the other portion of the property. With a VA loan, you can potentially buy a duplex, a triplex, a fourplex, or just buy a property and have somebody rent out a room, a lieutenant mansion if you've ever heard something like that. You can do this with zero down. You live in one unit as your primary residence and rent out the other units. The rental income from the other units can offset your mortgage payment and sometimes cover a huge portion of your housing or mortgage expense, or the entire thing if you do it really well. The VA loan is honestly one of the best loan products in the country for house hacking. It's the best one. Conventional buyers need bigger down payments, stronger reserves, and higher credit scores. There's no strict credit score requirement with a VA loan to start house hacking. Veterans can often buy a multi-unit property with zero down because they are owner occupying one of the units, and this is what's really important. This is an unbelievable advantage, and you can start building wealth and getting cash flow and leveraging a rental property faster than any other loan program on the planet. So what I'm going to do in this video is I'm going to give you a real world example of two of my favorite clients, and they have given me permission to let you know how they were successful. These clients are in the great state of Texas, but you don't need to be in Texas, and I help people all over the country utilize their VA loan and house hack every single week. So what I'm going to do in this video is I'm going to teach you how to house hack. I'm going to give you a real example of clients who I've helped. These clients are in Texas, and they've done over 3 mortgage transactions with me and found a way to build money on their first house while also buying another house. So I'm going to show you how, if you're disciplined and you are modest with your first house, how you can then leverage your second house with your VA loan and start to make money off your first house. Sounds pretty great. So let's talk about a couple common misconceptions first. A lot of veterans think, wait, I thought the VA loan was only for single family homes. Not true. The VA allows 1 unit, 2 unit, 3 unit, and 4 unit properties, as long as you occupy one of those units as your primary residence. Another misconception. I thought using my VA loan once meant I could never use it again. This is not the case at all. I have helped clients have 3 active VA loans at one time. And I'm going to show you how, if you start really small and start really smart, how you can use your VA loan over and over again. And even if you don't do it the right way, we can show you how you can get in a spot where you can reuse your VA loan. So one of the biggest things that we're going to talk about is how you can get approved from an underwriting perspective with your income. So if you can afford a full $500,000, $600,000, $700,000 house, then you're good. But if you can't afford that $700,000 triplex, duplex, quad, then we need to do a couple other really important things in order for you to use that income. So here's the thing with house hacking. It is not magic. There are still some risks and obstacles that we are going to need to overcome. We need to have stable income. We need to have reserves if we're buying more of a house than we can actually afford. We got to show and go over some good budgeting, realistic expectations. We need to make sure we find a good property. We get this inspected and appraised. It needs to be in a good location where you can rent it out. We're going to talk about you doing the landlord versus somebody else being the landlord. We're going to talk about tenants, good tenant strategies, bad tenant strategies. And then we're going to talk about how this entire house hacking can change your life. One of the biggest reasons I love teaching veterans about house hacking is because it changes the trajectory of most people's lives. Most people think, I just need a place to live. But if you buy strategically, your first property can become the foundation for long-term wealth. So the first thing that we want to talk about is your real estate agent. So you might already have a great real estate agent, and that's fantastic. If you don't have a real estate agent though, these are the things that I make sure that we always talk about ahead of time. The first thing is we want to make sure, if you're using your VA loan, that the real estate agent's commission gets completely covered by the seller. After the NAR settlement has come out, you now can negotiate this with the real estate agent. So you can say, hey, Mrs. Real Estate Agent, Mr. Real Estate Agent, I want the seller to pay for all of your commission and fees. This is negotiable, so if you haven't signed your buyer's agency agreement already, make sure you do that. The second thing that we want to try to do, depending on what your situation is and depending on what the market is, the real estate agent's going to know more, but if it's a good buyer's market, we want the seller to pay for all of your closing costs. We can use actually more than 4%. A lot of people think you can only use 4% for VA loans, but this isn't the case. I've used up to 7.5% before. Your loan officer will talk more about how much we can ask for, and if we get any extra money with a VA loan, we can use it to pay down consumer debt. We can give your earnest money back, and what we can also do with that seller paid closing cost is buy down your interest rate. And your lender will be able to tell you if this makes sense or not. A lot of times I don't recommend buying down the rate because we can just do an interest rate reduction refinance loan down the road. A lot of times it's a lot more powerful to pay off consumer debt because then we can lower your monthly mortgage debt obligation. But I won't get too far into that. The other thing that we want your real estate agent to be able to do is if the house ends up appraising for more than what we buy it for, we want them to have that good negotiation skills and maybe talk to the listing agent up front. Can we increase the purchase price if the house appraises for a higher value than we bought it for? If we can increase the purchase price, we can also increase the seller paid closing costs. That means the seller gets the same amount of money, but we can use more money to benefit you if we want to pay down debt or if we want to buy down your interest rate a little bit more. These are all things that your loan officer is going to want to talk to you about and things that we really need to watch out for before we even jump into the transaction. But let's go and talk a little bit more. So the first thing that we want to do is we want to go through your payment. All right. So Dave Ramsey will say you want no more than 25% of your monthly take-home pay on a 15-year mortgage. If you can do this, more power to you. I think it's awesome. I'm actually one of the lenders that doesn't hate Dave Ramsey. I think that if you can be wiser and have less debt, that's going to set you up better, right? But sometimes you can't do 15 years. Sometimes you can't hit 25% for that monthly payment, right? Sometimes it's going to be a little bit higher. But this is what we want to think about. If you go above that 25% mark of your monthly take-home pay, then what's going to happen is you're not going to have as much money for vacations, for food, for investing, which we're going to want to do with making extra mortgage payment. So let's try to keep that number at 25% of your monthly take-home pay. So I'll just give you an example right here of somebody who I recently closed a loan with and talk about what that could look like. So we'll just look and see what their income is. Okay, so this person worked at the Department of Corrections, right? So they made $4,625 a month for that. But wait, they also had VA disability, and this is a real power player because we can actually gross this money up too, right? Grossing it up means that for a VA loan, you can actually count more of your income, so you can count 125% of this income because let's just face it, tax-free income is better than my income, which is not tax-free. It's more powerful, right? So we're going to give you more credit for that. So this actually helps decrease that debt-to-income ratio, and we'll talk about that a little bit more. But we had disability income in the amount of $2,341 per month. This person wasn't 100% disabled, I think, just based off seeing this number between 70 to 90%. So the monthly take-home pay is about $6,966. So what we want to do is make sure that our mortgage payment is around 25% of that. That's kind of tough to do in Colorado Springs, so that's why we're going to want to have a high income earner, or we're going to want to have two different sources of income because it's going to be tough to hit that 25% mark. In Texas, this is a lot easier to hit, but we're just going to have a little bit more challenges in Colorado. It's expensive to own a house, but ideal payment would be around $1,741. This veteran didn't end up pursuing that, so they're going to have a little bit tougher time saving money long term. But if we can hit that 25% mark, go a little bit more modest, don't buy the house that you absolutely love for that first house. You're going to set yourself up to buy another house and start building rent or start building wealth through real estate faster. Another thing that we want to talk about is cash to close. The amazing thing about a VA loan, this is the true no money down, no money at all loan. There are a lot of times when I have really great real estate agents who I work with, so I'd be happy to recommend you to one if you end up don't having a real estate agent. But if we get a really strong real estate agent who can negotiate all of your closing costs, then you have no down payment and we have no money to get into a house. You pay earnest money, but a lot of times we can get this earnest money back. If it's a competitive market, you're buying a higher end home, there's multiple offers. There's some places in the country where it's a lot tougher to get your closing costs paid for. But if we get between 3% to 4% of closing costs, that should be safe, and you might even get a little bit of that money back depending on who you are. So let's try to get our real estate agent to negotiate all of our closing costs. And then we'll talk about the purchase price, right? So when we identify our payment, let's say $1,800 a month, right? It's going to be tough to get into a house for that payment, right? But that's really what we're going to be looking at for our purchase price is how do we hit that target monthly payment? And we can play with the numbers there, but I just want to show you a little bit about what all goes into a housing payment, right? So everybody knows the principal and interest, but what people don't often think about are the property taxes and the homeowner's insurance, right? So property taxes or principal, interest, property taxes, and homeowner's insurance. That acronym is PITI, PITI plus HOA. That is your monthly housing expense. So in this situation right here, $1,800 would have been the good mark, but this veteran ended up going with about $1,800 would have been that really sweet place, but the veteran ended up buying $2,358. So they're about 33% of their monthly take-home pay. It's a little bit higher, but the nice thing with this is that we are going to be able to reduce this veteran's interest rate with a VA interest rate reduction refinance loan, VA IRRRL. So after we do that VA IRRRL, after 6 to 7 on-time payments, we're going to lower that monthly payment to the point where they are actually below that 25% mark, so they can start saving and building wealth through other avenues or just making extra mortgage payments, which is a really powerful thing that you can do with the VA loan. Now, something that you should be thinking about anytime that you're working with a loan officer is you want to make sure that you understand the full process. If it's going too fast, your questions aren't getting answered, somebody's talking over your head, or they don't have enough time for you, this is where we want to take a tactical pause, because I tell veterans this all the time. The VA loan is not like other loan programs. It's a veterans benefit program designed to get you into a house for the least expensive that you possibly can. There are so many benefits that are entailed with it. So you want to make sure that you're working with somebody who understands those benefits and can leverage the VA loan and communicate that with a real estate agent, the buyer's agent, and the listing agent to get you the best possible deal. So make sure that you come prepared with a list of questions every time you're talking to your loan officer, and that you walk away being an expert in VA loans so that you know yourself how you can use that next house, and then also too so you can help impart some wisdom on some other veterans. The biggest thing that I make sure with my veterans is that we talk about the second house before we buy the first house, right? Because you can use your VA loan multiple times, you can lily pad, leapfrog from one house to another, and you need to be thinking about that second house when you buy the first house. Now, some people are trying to just figure out what is the whole purpose of a loan officer? What is the loan officer's job? Some people think like, oh, their job is to get me this pre-approval letter so that I can go make an offer. If all your loan officer is doing is getting you that pre-approval letter, then they are doing the bare minimum for the job. The job of the loan officer is to make sure that you do not make a terrible financial decision. And like I talked about, that you are thinking about that second house before you even buy the first house. So this is what you need to make sure that you do when you have your loan professional, because if they aren't thinking about asking you about, you know, your monthly take-home pay, asking you about what percentage that you want to use of your gross pay, then you could get in a bad situation, or asking you if this is going to be a 1, 3, 7 year house, then your goals on the second house might not be met and you'll get yourself in a sticky situation as you move down the road. So here are some big questions that you should know before you meet with your loan officer. The first question is time frame. Are you looking to move 30, 60, 90, 180 days out or a full year out? This is all going to be important when strategizing for your pre-approval. The second thing that you need to think about is the location. You should have a couple cities, maybe neighborhoods identified. If you're working with somebody who does loans all over the country, that's fine. You can kind of narrow that down as you go. But the more detailed information, the more value you're going to get from that initial loan consultation. You should also know what type of property you want to get into. Do you want to get into a single family, a condo, a townhouse, a duplex, triplex, quad? This will definitely steer the conversation, and a lot more is going to get unpacked. And you want to answer these questions before you meet with your loan officer. One warning is make sure that you talk with your loan officer. If you're thinking about buying a townhouse or condo, make sure you talk with your loan officer and your real estate agent about how much these would appreciate. Tell them what your goals are for moving out of the townhouse or condo, because there are some drawbacks with a townhouse or condo. A lot of times there are benefits because they're a lower purchase price, but then you also have HOAs. And if you want to move out of the house faster than 10 years, you could be upside down in that mortgage. And when you try to rent that house out, you're going to have to pay somebody to rent your house out, which is a tough, sticky situation that you do not want to get into as a veteran. And we already talked about this, so we want to have a price point that we're searching for, a threshold of say $350,000 to $500,000, whatever that is. We want to identify that, and that's all going to be tied into your target monthly payment, right? So you want to make sure that your loan officer is asking you, what do you feel comfortable each month paying for a mortgage payment? You want to make sure that they're asking you about that debt to income ratio so that you don't become house poor. We don't want to own a house but be house poor where we can't do the things that we care about: vacations, saving money, money for a rainy day, etc. So we talked about this a little bit. We want to have our cash to close ironed out. How much money can you bring to the closing table? If we're in a more competitive market, or we're making an offer on a house where a lot of other people are, we're not going to be able to ask the seller for as much money. And this makes sense, right? Think about if a seller has 3 offers on the table and one person's asking for 3.5% to 4% seller paid closing costs, and the other person says, I'll give you your house for what you ask for. You're going to have a lower opportunity to get that house if you're asking for money. So if you end up wanting to ask for money and ask for seller paid closing costs, usually you got to look for a house that has been on the market for a while, 120, 150, more than 30 to 60 days. It's going to be easier to get into that house. Also too, your buyer's agent, your real estate agent, is going to have some information from the listing agent on how urgently somebody wants to sell the house. So if somebody's floating 2 mortgage payments, they're probably going to be more likely to give you a better deal than if somebody only had their house out for like 6-7 days and they're getting multiple offers. You're not going to get somebody to pay for your closing costs if you are in that situation. So some other questions that your lender should ask you is, have you ever been through the pre-approval process before? If you have, you probably are going to have some after actions, things that you didn't completely understand with that, and you need to bring those questions to the lender. Okay, so now let's talk about the pillars of lending when we're going through and looking for a house in Colorado Springs. So the first thing is cash, right? So how much money do we feel comfortable putting down for closing costs or a down payment? Now with a VA loan, the nice thing is we don't have a down payment, so throw that out the window. Next, we got to decide, like, hey, do we want to get the perfect house as soon as we see it? Like, we want to find our house and we want to prosecute that target. We want to close on that house. Or do we feel comfortable waiting for the right house to pop up? I tell all of my clients that houses are like buses. There's always another one coming. But sometimes emotions get involved. We see the perfect house and we think that there's never going to be another one that pops up. If you think you're like that and you want to find the perfect house and then get that house, then what you need to do is you need to come with some money at the closing table, most likely. So you need to be talking with your lender, hey, I feel comfortable bringing $10,000, $15,000, $25,000 in order to get the house that I want. Now let's talk about credit. The nice thing about the VA loan is that there is no credit score minimum to utilize your VA loan. I've helped people with a 467 FICO get into a house. And I've also helped people with 800 plus FICOs get into a house, right? So there are some perks if you got better credit, but if you got bad credit, you can still get into a house, right? The national average is about 640 or above. So there's just gonna be a little bit more work. Sometimes you gotta do manual underwriting if you're below that 640. If you're with a good VA lender who doesn't have a lot of overlays or any any overlays on the VA loan, you should be able to navigate this process and still get approved no matter what your credit score is. Really what the VA is looking for is your late payment history, your income, and if you can afford the house, not necessarily your credit score. I made a video on this and I put the link in the comment section if you want to find out more if you don't fall in that 640 or above threshold. And the last one is income. So we've talked about income a little bit. How we look at it from a lender perspective is debt to income ratio, right? We have our income, which is $10,000, let's just say, and then our debt. We divide our debt by our income, and that's our debt to income ratio. What we strive for on the front end of that debt to income ratio is just your housing payment, is to have that number be below, at or below 25%. That's better for you, but the VA actually doesn't have a debt to income ratio per se. I've gone up to like 63% before for that debt to income ratio on the back end. So that's all your bills and your housing payment for that. I don't recommend going to the max with that because you put yourself in a situation where you could potentially be house poor, but your lender really needs to talk about all the implications of the mortgage payment that you are pursuing for that pre-approval. This is also another important note, something that I tell all my clients, is what you should look for a lender is somebody who's going to get you pre-approved, not pre-qualified for a loan. So all this stuff that I'm talking about, we're going to collect credit, income, asset documentation. We're going to send this to an underwriter. The underwriter is going to approve this and verify the loan officer's work to make sure that we're not taking any risks, so that when we get that pre-approval letter and we send it to the listing agent, that we know the only two things we need is we need a clean appraisal and we need clean title work. Both are outside of your control, and if both of those fail, you can walk away from the deal and keep your earnest money. If you have a lender who's only doing a pre-qualification letter, this is a red flag. Walk away because you are risking your earnest money. This is really important. So we've talked about all the important considerations that you need to have for getting and utilizing your VA loan in Colorado Springs. Obviously, there's going to be more nuances, but if you go into the loan conversation with this minimum criteria, everything that we discussed, you're going to be far more educated, empowered, and equipped to utilize and leverage your VA loan. I tell veterans this all the time. The VA loan is not just another mortgage product. It is a veteran's benefit product, and I'm going to teach you how you can leverage and utilize your benefits as a veteran. If you're a veteran and you've ever thought, there's no way I can do this, I don't know enough, I cannot afford to be a real estate investor, then I'd love to help you out. I'd love to do an initial loan consultation. So feel free to look me up, Dallas Frye, VA Loans. My contact information is also below. And if this video helped you, subscribe to the channel because we put out VA loan education videos weekly that are designed to help veterans build wealth through real estate. And if there's a specific city or topic you want me to cover next, let me know.